The grand war room glowed under flickering golden chandeliers as the Alpha King stood tall and commanding at the head of the massive strategy table, his powerful voice suddenly thundering through the chamber. What are these faint star marks on my battle maps? Who dared alter the plans that will decide the fate of our kingdom? Every general turned their eyes to the far corner. There Astrid stood small and trembling, the forgotten Omega cartographer, whose name they never bothered to learn. Her heart pounded wildly in her chest. For months Astrid had worked in silence, her hand instinctively adding delicate stars that only Astrid understood. Draven's gaze finally locked onto her. You? An Omega? His tone was filled with disbelief and disdain. Explain yourself before I have you thrown out of this council forever. Humiliation Astrid D over her like a freezing wave. Years of being invisible, of being treated as nothing more than a shadow in this palace of powerful alphas, rose up to suffocate her. Tears stung her eyes as low laughter spread among the generals. Which country are you listening from? Please comment below. I'd love to know how far this story reaches. Unable to endure their scorn any longer, Astrid turned and ran from the war room, her footsteps echoing down the cold corridor. Yet even as Astrid fled, a mysterious warmth bloomed deep within her chest, an invisible force pulling her toward the very king who had just shattered her world. The days that followed her humiliating flight from the war room blurred into one endless shadow. Within the vast halls of the royal citadel, where Astrid returned to her small corner of the cartographer's workshop, lantern light flickered softly over stacks of parchment and vials of ink as Astrid sat hunched over the massive table, her slender fingers tracing the lines of the latest battle map with practiced care. No one spoke to her. No one even glanced her way. The Alpha generals strode past like storms in poly Astrid D armor, their voices booming with plans of conquest, while Astrid remained as invisible as the dust motes dancing in the golden beams. Astrid moved like a ghost, fetching fresh scrolls from the high Astrid levies and mixing pigments. Without a sound, her Omega scent carefully masked by the sharp smell of ink and paper, so that the powerful alphas would not be reminded of her presence. In her heart a quiet ache bloomed like a flower pressed too long between pages. Why must I always be the one who sees, but is never seen? Astrid wondered, her thoughts swirling with the weight of years spent in silence. From childhood, Astrid had learned that an Omega's place was in the margins, never at the center of power. Yet here in this forgotten alcove, her hands worked with a tenderness that felt almost sacred, smoothing the parchment as if soothing the very land it depicted. Late into the night, when the citadel grew still, Astrid would pause, her quill hovering above an unmarked ridge or valley, and a strange warmth would pulse through her fingertips, urging her to add something more. But Astrid resisted. The memory of Draven's thunderous demand still burned fresh. A soft footstep broke the silence, and Astrid looked up to see the only soul who ever noticed her, a kindly older beta servant named Mira, carrying a tray of bread and broth. You work too hard, child, Mira whispered, setting the food beside her with gentle hands. The generals celebrate victories they barely earned, while you sit here mending their mistakes in secret. The heroine's throat tightened with emotion. I do what I can, Astrid replied, her voice barely above a breath. But sometimes I fear even my small corrections will be erased like footprints in the sand. Mira's eyes softened with understanding. The world values only roaring lions, yet the quiet stars guide the night. Keep shining, little one, even if they cannot see you yet. The words wrapped around her like a warm cloak, yet they could not chase away the deeper loneliness that settled in her bones. Astrid ate in silence, the broth warming her from within while her mind drifted to the faint pull Astrid had felt that night in the corridor, the mysterious warmth that tugged her toward the very king who had cast her aside. Days melted into nights, the routine unchanging. Astrid copied maps until her fingers cramped, then slipped away to her tiny chamber where Astrid curled beneath thin blankets, dreaming of maps that came alive with glowing paths. In the mornings, Astrid returned before dawn to find the generals already gathered around her fini. Astrid D worked debating routes without a single acknowledgement of the hand that had drawn them. One afternoon, as Astrid knelt to retrieve a fallen vial of indigo, ink and Alpha Officer Brew, Astrid D passed, nearly knocking her over. "Watch yourself, Omega," he muttered without looking down. Astrid steadied herself, heart racing, and whispered an apology that went unheard. Inside her chest, the ache deepened into something sharper, a longing not just to be seen but to matter, to prove that even the powerless could shape the fate of kingdoms. Yet Astrid kept her head bowed, her shoulders curved in the posture of invisibility Astrid had perfected over years. As evening fell and lanterns were lit, once more Astrid bent over a fresh map depicting the shadowed valleys ahead of the next campaign. Her hand trembled slightly as an instinctive urge rose within her to mark a tiny star at a narrow pass where danger seemed to whisper from the parchment itself. Astrid fought the impulse, knowing it could bring more scorn. But the warmth in her chest grew insistent, like a distant star calling across the void. Just as her quill touched the paper, ready to release the first delicate stroke, the heavy doors of the war room swung open, and a messenger burst in, breathless with urgent news from the front lines. Draven himself would review the maps at first light, he announced, and every cartographer must stand ready. Her breath caught. Draven, the same Alpha whose voice had shattered her world, now demanded her work again. A flicker of fear mixed with that inexplicable pull, and Astrid wondered if this time her hidden stars might finally be noticed, or if Astrid would remain forever in the shadows watching the world. Astrid quietly guided passer-by without a single glance. The war room lay silent and vast under the soft glow of dying lanterns as the last echoes of the general's footsteps faded into the night, leaving her utterly alone with the sprawling maps that covered the long oak table like a living tapestry of Dravendom's fate. Astrid had stayed behind, as always, her Omega instincts drawing her back to the parchment even after the heavy doors had been bolted from the outside for the evening. The air smelled of aged ink and poly. Astrid D would mingled with the faint metallic tang of the brass rulers Astrid used to copy every line with painstaking precision. Her fingers trembled slightly as Astrid unrolled a fresh Astrid ET depicting the shadowed valleys and jagged ridges of the upcoming campaign, the land itself seeming to whisper secrets only Astrid could hear. In her chest, that mysterious warmth bloomed again, stronger now, like a distant star awakening after years of dormancy. Astrid had felt it first as a child when Astrid traced rivers on old family scrolls, but had learned to bury it deep, fearing it would mark her as different in a world that crew Astrid D anything beyond alpha strength. Tonight, though, the pull was insistent, almost alive. Her hand moved of its own accord, the quill dipping into the vial of silver ink Astrid reserved for the finest details. As Astrid copied the main routes, her wrist turned in delicate arcs, adding faint star-like symbols at precise points, a narrow pass, here a hidden spring, there a ridge that overlooked what looked like safe ground. Each mark glowed ever so faintly for a heartbeat, as if the paper itself drank in starlight from some unseen sky. Cinematic in its quiet beauty, the symbols shimmered like constellations guiding lost travelers through the darkest nights. What is this power? Astrid wondered, her inner thoughts swirling with a mix of awe and terror. It feels as if the land itself is speaking through me, showing me where danger hides and where hope waits. The generals see only lines and arrows, but I see the heartbeat of the earth, the subtle shifts that could save lives or doom them. Tears pricked at her eyes as Astrid continued, the stars flowing effortlessly, now each one carrying an instinctive warning or blessing Astrid could not fully explain. The warmth spread through her veins like liquid starfire, empowering her in a way Astrid had never known. For the first time in her life, Astrid felt seen not by eyes, but by the very world Astrid served in silence. Yet doubt crept in like shadows at the edges of the lantern light. If they discover these marks, they will call me a fraud, or worse, a traitor, for daring to alter royal strategy. Still, Astrid could not stop. Her hand danced across the parchment, guided by a force greater than fear. Hours slipped by unnoticed, the map transforming under her touch, until it held not just Draven's bold plans, but her quiet corrections woven like threads of fate. A soft creak at the side door startled her, and Astrid froze, quill hovering mid-stroke. A young junior officer slipped in, one of the lower ranks who sometimes lingered late to study the maps, his face etched with exhaustion from the day's drills. He approached the table, rubbing his eyes, and glanced down at her work. His brow furrowed at one of the newly added stars, a delicate point glowing faintly near a forested valley. "What is this?" he muttered, more to himself than to her. "Some decorative flourish from the copyist?" He reached out as if to rub it away, but paused, his fingers hovering. The heroine's heart hammered wildly in her chest. Astrid wanted to explain, to tell him that the star marked a place where enemy scouts would camp. Unseen, that the land had shown her the ambush waiting there. But her voice remained locked in her throat, years of invisibility holding her silent. The officer shook his head, dismissing it with a tired chuckle. "Must be a flaw in the parchment," he said, turning away without another glance. He left as quietly as he had come, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving her alone once more with the glowing map and the echo of his words. Relief wa Astrid D over her mingled with a sharp pang of disappointment. Even when seen, her gift was invisible, dismissed as nothing. Yet the warmth in her chest did not fade. Instead, it pulsed brighter, connecting her to something vast and ancient, the bond Astrid did not yet understand, tugging gently toward the distant chambers where the Alpha King slept unaware. Astrid traced one final star, her thoughts racing. Perhaps one day these marks will speak louder than any general's voice. But as Astrid rolled the map carefully for morning delivery, a distant horn sounded from the outer walls, signaling urgent riders approaching with news from the front. Her breath caught. The campaign was moving faster than expected, and soon Draven would review these very maps again. Would her stars finally be noticed, or would they fade into obscurity like her own silent existence? The question hung in the air, heavy with possibility, as the lanterns flickered lower, casting long shadows across her hidden work. The archives stretched deep beneath the citadel, like forgotten catacombs where dust motes swirled in. Narrow shafts of moonlight filtering through high-barred windows and ancient astrolaves loomed like silent sentinels guarding secrets no one cared to remember. Astrid had slipped here after the war room incident, heart still racing from Draven's thunderous dismissal. Her small frame pressed against the cool stone wall as Astrid sought refuge in the one place where her presence went truly unnoticed. The air carried the heavy scent of aged leather and faded ink, a comforting weight that wrapped around her like an old blanket, yet tonight it only amplified the tremor in her hands. Astrid sank to the floor behind a towering stack of discarded scrolls, knees drawn to her chest, and let the quiet press in. "Why did I ever let the stars appear?" Astrid whispered to the emptiness, her voice a fragile thread in the vast silence. The warmth in her chest that had guided her quill now felt like a dangerous flame, one spark away from consuming everything Astrid had fought to keep hidden. Memories surged unbidden, pulling her back to the small Omega village of her childhood, where the world had first taught her the cost of being different. Astrid remembered the day the Alpha enforcers arrived, their armor glinting like cruel stars under the noon sun, as they declared her family weak and unworthy. Her mother's gentle hands had traced protective symbols on their humble maps, not for war but for safe paths through the fields, yet the enforcers had torn the papers to shreds, calling it foolish superstition. "We do not need Omega dreams," they had snarled, dragging her parents away, while Astrid clung to her. Little brother's hand, tears streaming down her face. The village turned its back on them, cast out into the wilds with nothing but the clothes on their backs, because an Omega's gift was seen as nothing more than a burden, a crack in the armor of Alpha strength. The flashback burned hot behind her eyes, and Astrid squeezed them shut, willing the pain away, but it only opened another wound deeper still. Astrid was barely 12 when Astrid first felt the pull in the palace orphanage, where they had placed her after the family's exile. Late one night in the dim study hall, her fingers had danced across a torn scrap of parchment, drawing tiny stars over a river bend that flooded every spring. The headmistress had discovered it, and puny Astrid D her publicly with a switch across her palms. The sharp sting still echoed in her memory. "Insolent girl," the woman had hissed, "you think your scribbles can change the world when even the strongest alphas bow to Draven?" From that day, Astrid learned to bury the gift, to become the shadow that copied without question, never daring to add a single mark that might betray her. Yet here in the archives, the stars had returned stronger than ever, refusing to stay silent any longer. Present fear gripped her throat like icy fingers as Astrid worried the faint symbols on the latest maps would finally expose her. What if Draven orders them examined closely? Astrid thought, her inner voice trembling with the weight of years of suppression. They will call me a traitor, label my gift as madness, and cast me out just like my family, all because I dared to see what they cannot. Tears slipped down her cheeks, hot and silent, as Astrid reached into her pocket for the small hidden scrap of parchment. Astrid always carried a private talisman against the world's cruelty. Her fingers traced a single protective star upon it, the lines flowing with instinctive grace, the warmth flooding back like a quiet promise that Astrid was more than the invisible girl they all ignored. In that moment her thoughts turned inward, empowering and raw. "I have spent my life voiceless, a ghost in the halls of power, but these stars are my voice, they speak. For every Omega silenced, for every heart told it was too weak to matter. If only I could stand tall and let the world hear what the land has shown me, the hidden dangers, the quiet paths to peace." Astrid longed for that voice to rise unashamed, to claim her place not through force but through the gentle power that had guided armies without them ever knowing. The star on the scrap glowed faintly under her touch, a tiny beacon of hope in the darkness, and for the first time the fear began to loosen its hold, replaced by a quiet resolve blooming like dawn after the longest night. Yet as Astrid tucked the parchment away, a distant sound shattered the stillness, heavy footsteps echoing down the archive corridor, accompanied by the unmistakable voice of a royal guard calling out her name. "Draven himself demands the cartographer," at once the guard shouted, drawing nearer. Her breath caught in terror and wonder, the mysterious pull in her chest surging stronger than ever, as if the bond itself was urging her toward the very Alpha who had shattered her world and now might be the one to finally see it whole. The shadowed valley stretched beneath a bruised sky where thunderheads gathered like angry gods, ready to unleash their fury on the unsuspecting army below. Rain la Astrid D sideways in silver Astrid ETS, turning the narrow pass into a churning river of mud, while lightning cracked open the darkness, revealing Draven's encampment huddled between steep ridges that now felt less like protection and more like the jaws of a trap. Tents strained against the wind, their canvas snapping like battle flags, while soldiers clutched their weapons, their faces pale in the flickering torchlight. The Alpha King stood at the center, his broad shoulders squared against the storm, barking orders that carried on the gale, yet even his commanding presence could not silence the unease rippling through the ranks. The position had seemed perfect on the maps, a natural choke point to halt the enemy advance, but now, as the night deepened, scouts reported faint enemy signals moving along the ridges above, exactly where one of her forgotten stars had once warned of hidden danger. Miles away in the quiet glow of the Citadel's war room, the heroine paced before the great table, her latest copied map unrolled beneath a single lantern, her heart hammering with a force Astrid could not name. The warmth in her chest had bloomed into a fierce, insistent pull since the moment the army marched out, a thread of invisible starlight connecting her to the distant valley, as if the land itself were crying out through her veins. Astrid pressed trembling fingers to the parchment, tracing the faint star Astrid had added weeks earlier, now erased by royal command, yet burned into her memory like a brand. Why does this ache feel so personal? Astrid wondered, her inner thoughts swirling with fear and an inexplicable urge that refused to be ignored. I have never spoken to him, never stood in his light, yet something deeper than duty tugs me toward Draven, as if my stars are not just marks on paper, but lifelines meant to shield him. The storm outside the Citadel windows mirrored the turmoil inside her soul, rain hammering the glass like urgent fists, while thunder rolled like distant war drums. Astrid closed her eyes and whispered a soft prayer over the map, her voice barely audible, yet filled with every ounce of quiet power Astrid had kept hidden for so long. Please let them see the warning, let the land guide them safely, even if I remain unseen. Her words carried the weight of every silenced Omega who had ever felt powerless, the emotion rising like a tide that threatened to overwhelm her small frame. Astrid had spent her life as a shadow, copying lines that decided fates, yet never shaping them openly. And now this bond, this mysterious warmth, made her feel both terrified and strangely alive, as though the stars were awakening not just on parchment, but within her own spirit. The pull sharpened suddenly, a vivid flash in her mind, showing the valley flooded with enemy shadows closing in under cover of the storm. Her breath caught. He is in danger, Astrid realized, the thought striking like lightning. Draven, who humiliated me, who never once saw my worth, now stands at the edge of disaster, and something in me cannot let him fall. Astrid battled the fear that clawed at her chest, the old trauma whispering that an Omega's place was silence, not salvation, yet the gift surged stronger, refusing to be buried. In her mind, Astrid saw the army's camp exactly as her star had marked it, catastrophic if they stayed. And her fingers itched to mark a new map, to send warning, though Astrid knew the riders would never reach them in time. Emotional tears slipped down her cheeks as Astrid leaned closer to the parchment, whispering again with raw honesty, I do not understand this bond, but if my stars have any power, let them protect him, let them show the army the path to safety before it is too late. The warmth flooded her arms, guiding her hand as Astrid added a fresh, delicate star on a small spare. Astrid a hurried correction, showing the safe ridge route just beyond the flooded pass. Astrid folded it carefully, her thoughts a whirlwind of hope and dread. For the first time, Astrid felt the faintest echo of his presence, through the bond a distant sense of his frustration and growing alarm that made her heart twist with unexpected tenderness. He does not know I exist, yet I feel him fighting the storm, fighting the unseen threat, and all I want is to be the quiet light that guides him home. The lantern flame flickered wildly, as if responding to her inner resolve, casting dancing shadows across the map like living stars. Outside the citadel, a messenger's horse thundered into the courtyard, its rider shouting urgent news. From the front, the camp was holding, but scouts had spotted enemy movement exactly where her star had predicted. Her pulse raced. The bond pulled harder now, urging her toward action Astrid had never dared before. Astrid clutched the marked paper to her chest, knowing that if Astrid sent it now through the fastest rider, it might still change everything, yet the risk of exposing her gift once more loomed like the storm itself. What if they reject it again? What if my voice is silenced forever, just as I begin to feel its power? The question hung heavy as the thunder outside reached a deafening crescendo, mirroring the storm building within her soul. Far away in the shadowed valley, Draven raised his sword against the howling wind, unaware that an unseen Omega cartographer was whispering his name like a prayer, her stars reaching across the miles to pull him back from the brink. Yet as the first enemy arrows whistled through the rain, the bond between them flared brighter than any lightning, and Astrid knew in her heart that the moment of revelation was rushing toward them. Both like the floodwaters already rising in the valley below. The first faint light of dawn crept over the jagged ridges surrounding the shadowed valley, painting the storm-soaked ground in hues of steel and muted gold, while the Alpha King's army stirred uneasily within their Rainlaw Astrid camp. Tents sagged heavily under the weight of water. Soldiers moved with weary determination, their breaths visible in the chilled morning air, as they prepared for what they believed would be another day of strategic holding. Yet tension hung thick in the mist like an unspoken warning. The young officer named Captain Elias stood near the central command tent, his eyes heavy from a sleepless night spent studying the maps by lantern light. Something had been nagging at him since the previous evening, a faint delicate star mark on the latest campaign parchment that he had almost dismissed as a copying error. Now as the first rays touched the paper unrolled before him on a makeshift table, the mark seemed to shimmer with quiet insistence exactly over the narrow pass where they had camped. His fingers traced the symbol, and a strange certainty settled in his chest. "This is no accident," he muttered to himself, his voice low against the soft murmurs of waking soldiers. The Omega cartographer, the one they all overlooked, had placed this here, and every instinct told him it was a warning. He glanced toward Draven's tent, where the Alpha King was already rising, his powerful frame silhouetted against the canvas. There was no time for debate. With a decisive nod, Captain Elias began issuing quiet orders, his tone firm, yet calm enough not to cause panic. "All units prepare for silent evacuation," he whispered to the nearest lieutenants. "Break camp with minimal noise, leave the fires burning low as decoys. We move to the higher ridge immediately." The soldiers exchanged confused glances, but the quiet authority in his voice and the memory of past narrow escapes compelled them to obey without question. Tents were dismantled with practiced efficiency, horses were saddled into Astrid tones, and supply wagons rolled forward on muffled wheels as the entire army began slipping away from the valley floor like ghosts retreating before the rising sun. The heroine stood at the high window of the war room in the distant citadel, her hands pressed against the cold glass, her breath fogging the pain as Astrid stared toward the horizon where Astrid knew the army camped. The bond within her chest pulled with fierce intensity, a warm current of starlight, connecting her directly to the unfolding events in the valley, as if the land itself were feeding her visions through her gift. Astrid could almost see the faint star mark glowing on the map, and Captain Elias's hands could feel the moment he chose to trust it. Her heart raced with a wild mixture of hope and terror. Have they seen it? Astrid wondered, her inner thoughts tumbling like the storm clouds still lingering overhead. Will my small star be enough to save them, or have I only painted a target on my own back by daring to mark Draven's plans? Tears of anxious emotion welled in her eyes as Astrid whispered softly to the empty room, "Please let them listen, please let the land's warning reach them through my stars. I may be invisible to them all, but I refuse to let my gift remain powerless when lives hang in the balance." Astrid closed her eyes, focusing on the pull, feeling the army's movement as clearly as if Astrid walked among them, the soft shuffle of boots, the creak of wagon wheels, the quiet determination of men following an instinct they did not fully understand. Pride bloomed quietly within her chest for the first time, mingling with the fear. Even if they never know it was me, even if my name stays forgotten, these stars are changing fates. They are proving that the powerless can still guide the powerful, that one quiet Omega can alter the course of a kingdom from the shadows. The warmth in her chest grew brighter, spreading through her veins like liquid courage, empowering her spirit and strengthening her resolve. Astrid watched with her inner sight as the last of Draven's forces crested the ridge just as the first enemy scouts crested the opposite heights. Moments later, the valley erupted in chaos. Enemy forces swept down in a coordinated strike, their war cries shattering the dawn's silence as arrows rained down and soared CLA Astrid D against the empty camp. Tents that still stood as decoys were torn apart, fires were scattered, and triumphant shouts filled the air only to turn into confused anger when they realized Draven's army had Vani Astrid D. The camp was empty. The strike had hit nothing but ghosts and abandoned embers. A surge of overwhelming emotion flooded the heroine as Astrid felt the success through the bond, her knees nearly buckling with relief and joy. Welcome back to the Alpha King Rain channel. Today I'm bringing you a brand new and incredibly captivating story that will surely enthrall you if you listen to the whole video. The story is entirely fictional. The video is created using AI, and it's designed to provide value, entertainment, and positive education for viewers aged 13 and up. Now, let's dive into today's story. They made it. Astrid breathed, her voice trembling with the weight of years of silence, finally broken in her own heart. My stars saved them. For the first time, Astrid felt truly seen, not by eyes, but by the unfolding destiny Astrid had quietly shaped. Yet even as victory warmed her, the bond tugged harder, sharper, now pulling her attention back toward the citadel gates, where riders were already thundering in with urgent news from the front. Draven had survived thanks to her mark, but now he would demand answers. He would search for the mapmaker who had placed the saving star, and this time there would be no hiding in the shadows. Her breath caught as the realization settled over her like the first true light of morning. The moment Astrid had both feared and secretly longed for was rushing toward her. The Alpha King, who had once humiliated her, was about to discover the quiet Omega whose stars had been protecting his campaign all along, and Astrid had no idea whether he would embrace that truth or shatter her world once more. The citadel courtyard buzzed with the thunder of returning riders, their horses lathered and breathing hard as the first light of morning spilled across the stone walls, turning the world into a canvas of gold and shadow after the valley's narrow escape. Messengers dismounted in haste, their boots splashing through puddles left by the storm, while servants hurried to stable the animals, and the air filled with urgent voices carrying news of victory snatched from the jaws of defeat. Inside the grand war room, the Alpha King paced like a caged storm, his powerful frame still clad in rain-dampened armor, mud streaking his boots, and the scent of wet earth clinging to him like the memory of danger barely averted. His generals clustered around the table, unrolling the very map that had guided their silent retreat. The faint star mark now glowing under lantern light, like an accusation and a salvation all at once. Who placed this symbol? Draven demanded, his voice a deep rumble that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. Laced with frustration and something deeper, a dawning realization that shook the foundations of his command. It saved us all, yet none of you claim it. Find the mapmaker now. Guards moved swiftly, their armor clanking as they swept through the halls, searching for the one soul who had lingered in the shadows for so long. The heroine felt the bond surge within her chest before the footsteps even reached her workshop door. A warm, insistent pull that made her breath catch, and her fingers tremble around the quill Astrid had been holding uselessly since dawn. Astrid stood frozen at her small table, the latest parchment half copied, her heart pounding with a force that blended terror and an inexplicable hope. They are coming for me, Astrid thought, her inner voice a whirlwind of panic and quiet wonder. After all these months of invisibility, after the humiliation, in this very room Draven finally seeks the hand behind the stars. What if he sees only weakness? What if this bond one feel is nothing but a cruel illusion meant to break me once more? Tears pricked at her eyes as memories of past rejections flaw Astrid through her mind, yet beneath. The fear a flicker of unrecognized strength stirred like the first star-piercing storm clouds. The heavy doors burst open, and 2 guards stepped inside, their expressions stern, but respectful in a way that felt utterly foreign. Draven summons the cartographer, one announced, his gaze finally landing on her small form with surprise. "Come with us." Her legs moved before her mind could fully catch up, carrying her through the corridors where servants paused to stare, and whispers followed like trailing shadows. The bond grew warmer with every step, pulling her toward the war room, like an invisible thread of starlight connecting her fate to his. Astrid could almost feel his presence, now the weight of his confusion, and the first stirrings of something profound that made her pulse race. When they entered the grand chamber, the air thickened with tension, the generals parting like waves before a tide as the guards led her to the head of the table. There he stood, the Alpha King, his broad shoulders tense, his eyes lifting to meet hers for the very first time. Their gazes locked, and the world seemed to narrow to that single electrifying moment. A spark ignited deep within her chest, the mate bond flaring to life like a constellation bursting into full brilliance, warm and undeniable, flooding her veins with a rush of emotion that stole her breath. He is real, Astrid thought, her inner world spinning with panic and a fragile hope Astrid dared not name. The man who dismissed me as nothing now stands before me, and something ancient in my soul recognizes him, as if the stars themselves have been waiting for this. Draven stared, stunned, his powerful frame going still as recognition and disbelief warred across his chiseled features. "You, the Omega from the Council," he said, his voice lower, now carrying a note of astonishment that silenced the entire room. "The faint star that saved my army, it was yours?" For a heartbeat his perspective flickered inward, a rare glimpse of the Alpha King's turmoil. How had he overlooked her, this quiet presence whose marks had guided his campaigns through months of hidden peril? Guilt twisted in his chest, sharp and unexpected, as the bond tugged at him too, though he did not yet understand its full depth. Astrid stood there, small yet radiant in the lantern glow, her hands clasped tightly to hide their trembling as the weight of every general's stare pressed upon her. "I only followed what the land showed me," Astrid whispered, her voice soft but steady for the first time, carrying the quiet power of stars long suppressed. "The symbols come instinctively, like whispers from the earth, warning of dangers your maps could not see." Her words hung in the air, emotional and sincere, laced with the ache of years spent invisible, yet they resonated with a truth that made Draven's eyes widen further. He stepped closer, drawn by the same invisible force, his commanding presence suddenly tempered by something vulnerable. "Tell me more," he urged, his tone no longer thunderous, but edged with genuine curiosity and the first threads of regret. "How many times have your stars corrected my path without my knowledge?" The heroine's heart swelled with a mix of fear and empowerment, her inner thoughts racing like shooting stars. "This is the moment I have dreaded and dreamed of, the chance to be seen, to let my gift finally speak. Yet the bond between us feels so vast, so alive, that I fear it will change everything I have ever known." Astrid met his gaze again, the spark deepening into a warm glow that made her feel both exposed and strangely protected. The generals shifted uneasily, murmuring among themselves, but Draven raised a hand silencing them, his focus entirely on her. For the first time in her life, Astrid felt the pull of destiny, not as a burden, but as a quiet triumph, the powerless Omega stepping into the light of the very Alpha who had once cast her aside. Yet as he leaned forward to examine the map beside her shoulder, his breath warm against the air. Between them a messenger burst through the doors with urgent news from the front lines. "Enemy forces are regrouping, my king," the rider announced, breathless, and the scouts report a new threat moving toward the ridge where we now stand. Draven's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking back to her with a question that hung unspoken but heavy with implication. The crisis was far from over, and her stars would be needed again, this time under the full gaze of the man whose world Astrid had quietly shaped. Her pulse thundered as the bond flared brighter, pulling them closer into a shared fate neither had anticipated, and Astrid wondered with a swirl of panic and hope whether this first true meeting would forge an alliance or shatter the fragile stars of her hidden world forever. The heavy oak door of the private royal chamber clicked shut behind them, sealing the world outside, and leaving only the soft golden glow of a single lantern illuminating the long table where maps from months past lay unrolled like pages from a forgotten epic. The Alpha King gestured for her to sit, his movements now gentler than the commanding force Astrid had known in the war room. Astrid lowered herself onto the edge of a velvet chair, her hands folded tightly in her lap to hide their tremble while her heart beat a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Here in this intimate space, with its tapestries of ancient battles and the faint scent of aged leather and wax, the bond between them hummed like a distant melody, growing clearer with every shared breath. Astrid could feel his presence, so acutely, the warmth in her chest responding like stars aligning after long separation. Draven stood across from her, his powerful frame casting a long shadow as he unrolled one map after another, his fingers tracing the faint star marks that dotted the parchment like celestial breadcrumbs. These symbols, he said, his voice low and edged with disbelief, they appear on every major campaign map for the last 6 months. Victories we attributed to strategy alone. Now I see your hand guided us through ambush, Astrid S we never saw coming. Tell me, Omega, how is this possible? Astrid drew a steadying breath, her inner thoughts swirling with a mix of fear and quiet empowerment. For so long I was invisible, a ghost copying lines without voice, yet these stars are my truth, my gift from the land itself. They come not from training, but from a deeper sense. The earth whispers dangers and paths through me, showing safe fords before floods, hidden passes before enemy scouts, even the quiet ridges where supply lines could hold against storms. As Astrid spoke softly, her voice gaining strength with each word, Draven listened, his eyes widening with growing realization. He leaned closer, examining a map of the previous river crossing, where her star had marked a safe ford, saving hundreds from a flash flood that would have claimed the army, and another of the mountain pass where her symbol had warned of a rock slide that later buried an enemy ambush party. His perspective shifted inward for a moment, deep shock rippling through him like a stone dropped into still water. How could I have been so blind, he thought, the regret sharp and immediate in his chest. I dismissed these marks as errors, ordered them erased time and again, while this quiet Omega, this woman whose presence I never even noticed, has been the silent guardian of my kingdom. The arrogance of my alpha pride blinded me to the very mate bond now pulling at my soul, and to the power Astrid carries that my generals could never match. Guilt weighed heavy as he looked at her, not as a servant, but as the powerful force Astrid had always been, the one whose unseen stars had rewritten fate without seeking glory. The heroine felt the shift in his gaze, and her cheeks warmed with emotion, tears of relief and validation glistening at the corners of her eyes. I never meant to challenge your command, Astrid continued, her words trembling, yet sincere, only to help in the only way I knew how. Every star was a prayer for safety for the soldiers who fight, while I remain behind a quiet hope that even the powerless could shape the world for the better. Draven nodded slowly, his voice softening with respect that surprised even him. You have saved us more times than I can count, and I never once thanked you. I was wrong to overlook you, to treat your gift as insignificant. In that moment their dialogue flowed, careful and respectful, like the first tentative steps across a moonlit bridge. He asked about specific marks, and Astrid explained each one with quiet passion, describing how the land showed her the hidden currents, the subtle warnings that no generals I could catch. Her inner voice sang with empowerment, I am being heard for the first time, my stars are finally speaking through me, and this alpha, this king, is listening not with scorn, but with wonder. The bond deepened slowly, earned through these shared revelations, no rush, no demand, only the gentle unfolding of trust that made her feel seen and valued in a way that healed the old wounds of invisibility. He shared a rare glimpse of his own doubts about past decisions, admitting how the pressure of leadership had made him rely too heavily on traditional strength, and Astrid offered gentle insights, drawn from her gift, that made him nod with thoughtful agreement. The conversation stretched like starlight across the night, their words weaving a fragile bridge of understanding that neither had expected, yet both felt drawn to protect. Yet as they spoke, a soft knock interrupted, the chamber door creaking open to reveal a trusted advisor, his face pale with fresh intelligence. "My king," the advisor whispered, "the political factions in the court have caught wind of the Omega's involvement. Whispers of rebellion stir among the traditional alphas who see her influence as a threat to our ways, and they gather even now to challenge her place at your side." Draven's jaw tightened, his hand instinctively moving closer to hers in a protective gesture that sent sparks through the bond. The heroine's heart raced with new fear, the slow burn connection, tested already by the shadows of opposition gathering beyond the chamber walls. Would her voice survive the coming storm, or would the stars that had begun to shine so brightly be forced back into darkness once more? The moon hung low and luminous over the royal gardens, casting a silvery veil across winding paths, lined with blooming night jasmine and ancient oaks whose leaves whispered secrets in the gentle breeze. Lanterns swayed softly from low branches, painting the world in hues of pearl and shadow as the Alpha King led her away from the private chamber into this quiet sanctuary where the weight of maps and politics felt distant for the first time. Astrid walked beside him, her steps light, yet hesitant on the cool stone, her Omega heart still reeling from the revelations that had unfolded like stars emerging from behind clouds. The bond between them thrummed warmer, now a steady pulse of starlight that connected their souls, without demand, allowing space for trust to grow slowly and beautifully. In her chest, old fears battled with a rising sense of being truly seen for the first time in her life. "I have spent years as a shadow," Astrid thought, her inner voice swirling with emotion. "Yet here in this moonlit garden, an Alpha King walks with me, listening, as if my words hold the same weight as his conquests." The warmth of his presence beside her felt both thrilling and terrifying, a gentle pull that made her wonder if Astrid dared to hope for more than invisibility. Draven glanced at her, his strong profile softened by the silver light, his voice carrying a rare vulnerability when he spoke. "These gardens have always been my refuge," he admitted quietly, his gaze drifting to the distant fountains where water sparkled like scattered diamonds. "Yet even here the burdens of leadership press heavy. I have led armies to victory through Astrid or force and strategy, but tonight, after seeing how your stars truly guided us, I question if my pride has cost Draven Dom more than I realized. Losses we could have avoided if I had only looked closer, if I had valued every voice, not just the loudest alphas." His words hung in the air, sincere and unguarded, revealing a depth Astrid had never imagined in the commanding ruler who once dismissed her existence. Astrid felt her heart soften, further the bond strengthening with each shared breath as Astrid replied, her voice soft yet laced with quiet strength. "Your doubt honors you, my king, because it shows you are willing to see beyond the old ways. My stars have never sought glory, only safety for those who fight and for the land that sustains us all. I too have known loss, the kind that comes from being silenced, from watching opportunities slip away, because no one believed an Omega could offer guidance. But walking here with you, feeling heard for the first time, it stirs something empowering in me, a voice I thought was lost forever." Their dialogue flowed like the gentle stream nearby, careful and respectful, building layers of trust. Without haste, each were a stepping stone across the chasm that had once separated them. He asked about the land's whispers, how the stars revealed themselves to her, and Astrid described the instinctive pulled away certain ridges called to her like old friends, warning of hidden dangers or blessing safe paths. In turn, he shared stories of battles where victory had felt hollow, the weight of decisions that kept him awake under these same stars. Her inner thoughts danced with newfound courage. This moment, this slow unfolding of hearts, is changing me. I am no longer just the cartographer in the corner. I am seen, valued, and the bond between us feels like a quiet promise of partnership earned through honesty, not force. The air around them grew sweeter with the scent of night flowers as they paused beside a stone bench overlooking the illuminated palace walls. He turned to her fully, his eyes reflecting the moonlight, filled with a tenderness that sent sparks through the bond. "You have shown me a different kind of strength," he said, his tone low, an emotional one rooted in intuition and quiet power. "I offer you my protection, not as a ruler to a subject, but as one who recognizes your worth. Stay close, let me shield you from the whispers of those who fear change while we learn more of this connection between us." The words wrapped around her like a warm cloak, yet they left her heart unsettled, a flutter of hope mingled with the shadow of uncertainty. Protection, Astrid thought, her mind racing with the weight of what it might mean. The bond pulls me toward him stronger than ever, but the world outside these gardens stirs with opposition, and I fear that accepting his offer could either lift me into true power or draw dangers I am not yet ready to face. As they stood there, the moon watching like a silent guardian, a distant bell tolled from the citadel, signaling the late hour, and with it came the faint sound of hurried footsteps approaching from the garden's edge. A messenger appeared, breathless, his face etched with concern, bearing news that the political factions had grown bolder, their murmurs of rebellion now reaching the outer courts. Draven's jaw tightened, his hand brushing lightly against hers in a gesture of quiet solidarity, yet the interruption reminded them both that the slow-burn connection they were nurturing would soon be tested by forces far beyond the peaceful gardens. Her pulse quickened with the realization that this fragile trust, this emerging romance born of stars and vulnerability, might be the very thing that either united them against the coming storm or pulled them apart under its relentless pressure. The war tent stood resolute amid the flickering torchlight of the forward camp, its heavy canvas walls rippling softly in the night breeze, while the distant sounds of soldiers settling for rest drifted like faint echoes across the moonlit plains. Inside, the Alpha King sat alone at the sturdy campaign table, old maps from months of campaigns spread before him like faded battle scars, each one bearing the faint ghostly traces of stars that had been ordered erased by his own hand. Lantern flames danced across the parchment, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper accusations. As he traced the smudged marks with calloused fingers, his broad shoulders hunched under the weight of realization. How many times had he dismissed these delicate symbols as mere copying flaws or artistic whims? He wondered, his inner thoughts churning like a storm-tossed sea. I saw them as insignificant errors from an invisible omega, yet each erased star now screams of victories we nearly lost, lives we could have sacrificed because my arrogance blinded me to her quiet power. The regret cut deep, a blade twisting in his chest as memory after memory resurfaced the council, where he had humiliated her, the orders to scrub the maps clean the way he had never once lifted his eyes to truly see the woman whose gift had silently steered his army from disaster time and again. Guilt flooded him raw and unrelenting, mingling with the growing awareness of the mate bond that now pulsed warmly in his veins, a connection he had ignored just as he had ignored her. Astrid is my fated one, he realized, the thought striking like lightning across his soul, the very omega whose stars have protected my kingdom, while I treated her as nothing more than a shadow in the corner. I have failed her, failed the bond, failed the very principles of strength I claim to uphold by, valuing only alpha force over the powerless wisdom that saved us all. Tears of remorse stung his eyes rare and unbidden as he studied a particularly bold star on an old ridge map, one that had prevented an ambush he had not even known existed. The bond tugged at him, insistent and tender, urging him to make amends, to recognize the power Astrid carried, the voice Astrid had been denied for so long. He straightened his powerful frame, resolve hardening amid the regret, determined to change the way he led, not just in war, but in the quiet matters of the heart. At that moment the tent flap lifted, and the heroine stepped inside, carrying a fresh stack of newly copied maps, her small hands steady despite the flutter in her chest. The air between them thickened with the bond's gentle warmth as their eyes met, and Astrid felt the shift in him, the vulnerability that made her own heart ache with unexpected compassion. Astrid had come at his quiet summons, her steps guided by the same starlit pull that had grown stronger since their garden walk. Yet tonight Astrid carried more than parchment. Astrid carried the first fragile seeds of her own empowerment. "My king," Astrid said, her voice soft, but carrying a new steadiness that surprised even her, "these are the updated maps for the next advance. I have added only what the land whispered, though I know the risk it brings." Draven rose to greet her, his gaze filled with a depth of emotion that made the lantern light seem brighter. "Please sit with me," he replied, his tone gentle and supportive, no longer the thunder of command, but the warmth of a man confronting his mistakes. "I have been studying these older maps alone, and what I see now fills me with regret deeper than any battlefield loss. Every erased star, every time I dismissed your gift, I realize now how close I came to leading us into shadows you alone could illuminate. You have been the quiet guardian of this campaign, the power behind victories I claimed as my own, and I was blind to it all." Her inner thoughts swirled with a rush of validation and quiet triumph. "For years I was invisible, a voiceless omega whose stars spoke only to the parchment, yet here he stands admitting the truth, acknowledging my worth in a way that makes the bond feel like a bridge to something greater. I am stepping out of the shadows, finding my voice not through force, but through the gentle strength that has always lived within me." Tears glistened in her eyes as Astrid set the maps down and met his gaze fully. "Your words heal wounds I carried in silence," Astrid answered, her voice gaining strength with each syllable. "I never sought recognition, only the chance to protect through what the land showed me. But hearing you speak of regret, and seeing the way you now look at me, it empowers me to believe that even the powerless can rise to stand beside kings." Their conversation turned gently supportive, like stars guiding ships through night seas, as he asked her to explain the new marks, and Astrid did so with growing confidence, describing the subtle warnings, the hidden paths, the way her gift revealed safe routes that no generals I could catch. He listened intently, nodding with respect, offering his own insights, not as orders, but as shared thoughts, creating a dialogue that wove their strengths together. In those moments Astrid felt her voice bloom stronger, a quiet force rising within her, the invisible girl transforming into one who could shape destinies openly. The bond deepened, earned through honesty and mutual vulnerability, wrapping them in a warmth that promised redemption and partnership. Yet as they leaned closer over the newest map, studying a critical pass together, a sudden commotion rose outside the tent, hurried footsteps and raised voices cutting through the night. A trusted lieutenant burst in, his face etched with urgency. "My king, the political factions have sent envoys. They demand an immediate council, declaring the Omega's influence a threat to tradition, and they bring accusations that could rally half the court against her." Draven's jaw tightened, his hand instinctively reaching toward hers in protective solidarity, while the heroine's heart raced with fresh resolve and fear. The approaching threat loomed like storm clouds on the horizon, testing the fragile empowerment Astrid had just begun to claim, and the slow burn connection that had only started to heal old wounds. The Grand Council Hall of the Forward Command Post echoed with the low rumble of gathered voices, its vaulted stone ceilings amplifying the tension that crackled like unseen lightning across the assembled nobles and generals. Torches flared along the walls, casting dramatic shadows that danced over Astrid armor and embroidered banners, while the long oak table groaned under the weight of unrolled maps and scattered reports. The Alpha King sat at the head, his powerful presence a steady anchor amid the storm, yet his eyes kept drifting to her with quiet protection as Astrid stood at his side for the first time, no longer hidden in the cartographer's corner, but placed openly where every gaze could scrutinize her small frame. The air thickened with the sharp scent of Astrid leather and smoldering resin as the highest-ranking alphas rose one by one, their faces etched with outrage and disbelief. An Omega influencing royal strategy, one grizzled general thundered, slamming a fist on the table. This is an insult to every alpha who has bled for this kingdom. Her marks may have saved a camp, but they mock the traditions that built our empire. Whispers rippled through the nobles like wind through dry grass, some nodding fiercely, others exchanging glances heavy with suspicion. Astrid felt their stares like cold blades pressing against her skin, yet within her chest the bonds. Warm glow steadied her, refusing to let old fears drag her back into silence. They see only weakness, Astrid thought, her inner voice rising with a courage that surprised even her. A quiet Omega daring to stand where only alphas have ruled. But my stars have proven their power, and I will not shrink away now. Doubt still flickered at the edges like shadows at twilight, whispering that one misstep could send her tumbling back into invisibility, yet the warmth of Draven's nearness and the memory of his regret fueled a new resolve, blooming like starlight piercing storm clouds. Draven lifted a hand, his voice calm, but firm, cutting through the growing unrest. Enough. Her gift has guided us through dangers none of you foresaw. I will not discard wisdom, because it comes from an Omega. The words carried quiet authority, not a roar of command, but a measured defense that made several generals shift uncomfortably. Astrid drew strength from his support, her heart swelling with emotion as Astrid stepped forward, her voice emerging soft at first, then gaining clarity like a hidden spring breaking through stone. I do not seek to replace your strength, my lords, Astrid said, meeting their eyes with steady grace. Only to offer what the land itself reveals through me. The stars mark paths of safety, not conquest alone. They speak for every soldier who deserves to return home, not through force, but through foresight. Her words hung in the air, emotional and empowering, carrying the weight of every silenced voice Astrid had once embodied. A noble alpha sneered, leaning forward with a sneer. And who is to say these marks are not treasonous whispers meant to weaken us? An Omega's place is in the shadows, not at the council table. The room erupted in murmurs, some voices rising in agreement, others hesitant as the conflict escalated, painting the hall in cinematic tension with clenched jaws and narrowed eyes. Astrid felt the pull of doubt again, sharp and familiar, yet Astrid lifted her chin, the bond thrumming brighter, reminding her of the journey from invisible to seen. I have hidden my gift for years, Astrid continued, her inner thoughts a whirlwind of rising courage and lingering fear, because the world taught me it was worthless. But these stars have saved lives while prejudice nearly cost us everything. If we cling only to old ways, we blind ourselves to the true power that lies in every voice, no matter how quiet. Draven nodded, his gaze filled with pride and quiet support, his hand brushing hers beneath the table. In a gesture invisible to the others, yet electric through the bond. I stand with her, he declared, his tone leaving no room for challenge. Her wisdom has proven itself on the battlefield, and I will not let tradition blind us to progress. The generals exchanged uneasy looks, some retreating into silence, while others muttered of rebellion brewing in the outer courts. The opposition grew thicker, heavier, like gathering thunderheads, yet Astrid stood taller than ever. Her spirit empowering itself with each passing moment, the powerless Omega finding her voice amid the very council that once erased her marks. As the meeting drew to a tense close and the nobles began to file out with stiff bows, a young lieutenant lingered near the side entrance, his face pale and his eyes darting nervously. Astrid caught his glance and felt a chill slip down her spine as he slipped a sealed note into the hand of a trusted guard, whispering urgently before vanishing into the corridor. Draven noticed too, his jaw tightening as the guard approached and passed the message discreetly. Unfolding it in the flickering torchlight, his expression darkened. The note revealed a secret plot already taking shape among the most traditional factions, a coordinated effort to discredit her gift, to spread rumors that her stars were dark omens meant to undermine the throne, and to strike at the bond itself by isolating her from Draven's protection. Her heart raced with a surge of fear mingled with defiant courage as the words confirmed the danger, closing in like unseen enemies on a shadowed ridge. They plot against us both. Astrid realized, her inner thoughts swirling with resolve, yet laced with doubt. The stars that guided armies now draw real threats, and I must find the strength to face them or risk losing everything we have only begun to build. Draven folded the note, his hand finding hers openly, now a silent vow amid the emptying hall, but the mini cliffhanger loomed heavy, the secret alliance already moving in the shadows, ready to test the fragile alliance of stars and crowns before the dawn could bring new light. The supply column wound through the narrow forested pass like a river of steel and canvas wagons, creaking under heavy loads of grain and arrows, while the midday sun filtered through the canopy in shafts of golden light that danced across the armored flanks of the escort riders. The Alpha King rode at the front, his powerful frame commanding yet watchful, his gaze sweeping the treeline where shadows seemed to shift with unnatural intent. Astrid rode beside him on a gentle mare, her small hands clutching the reins as the bond between them hummed with quiet intensity, a starlit thread that had grown stronger through every shared word and glance. The political murmurs from the council still echoed in her mind like distant thunder, yet here in the open air with the scent of pine and earth rising around them, Astrid felt the first true bloom of confidence rising within her chest. This is more than survival, Astrid thought, her inner voice steady and empowering. I am no longer the invisible cartographer copying lines in secret. My stars have earned their place, and this Alpha, who once overlooked me, now rides with me, as an equal, the bond pulling us closer with every heartbeat. Suddenly a scout burst from the underbrush, his horse lathered and his voice urgent. Ambush ahead, my king, enemy archers on the ridge, and foot soldiers blocking the trail. The column halted in a ripple of tension, horses snorting and soldiers drawing weapons as the air thickened with the metallic promise of conflict. Draven's jaw tightened, his hand instinctively reaching toward her in protective instinct, but Astrid was already moving, guided by the familiar warmth surging through her veins like liquid starfire. Astrid dismounted, swiftly unrolling a small field map from her saddlebag, her fingers dancing across the parchment with instinctive grace, adding a fresh, delicate star mark at a hidden side trail that the land whispered was safe and swift. The symbol glowed faintly for a heartbeat under the dappled sunlight, a quiet beacon of foresight that no generals I could have foreseen. Look here, Astrid said, her voice clear and confident for the first time, carrying across the column without hesitation. The stars show us a detour through the eastern thicket. It will shield us from the arrows and let us flank them before they strike. Draven turned to her, his eyes filled with open admiration, the bond flaring brighter between them as he nodded without hesitation. Your gift has saved us again, he replied, his tone warm with growing respect and something deeper, a tenderness that made her heart flutter. I see now how blind I was to let tradition silence such power. You stand here not as shadow, but as the light that guides us all, and I am grateful beyond words." Emotional dialogue flowed between them, even amid the rising danger, his words wrapping around her like a promise earned through fire. "I have watched you rise from the corners of the war room to this moment," he continued, his voice low, yet carrying the weight of redemption. "Your confidence, your voice, it empowers not just me, but every soul in this column." Astrid felt tears of quiet triumph sting her eyes, her inner thoughts swirling with empowerment and the slow burn warmth of his admiration. "For years I hid this gift, fearing rejection, yet now with him beside me I feel truly powerful, not because of the bond alone, but because I have found my own strength, the voice that was always mine to claim." "Thank you, my king," Astrid answered softly, her words sincere and laced with the emotion of a journey long denied. "Your belief in me has unlocked doors I thought were sealed forever. Together we prove that even the powerless can turn the tide of war and of hearts." The soldiers moved swiftly, following her marked trail, the column slipping into the thicket with disciplined quiet as the enemy ambush unleashed Astrid D its first volley of arrows that whistled harmlessly into empty air behind them. Cinematic in its beauty, the forest embraced them like an old friend, the leaves rustling in approval. As they emerged on higher ground, flanking the attackers, who now scrambled in confusion. Draven fought at the front, his sword flashing in controlled arcs, while Astrid watched from the safety of the ridge, her heart swelling with pride at the way her star had once again rewritten the moment. Victory came swiftly, the enemy scattering like leaves in the wind, yet as the last echoes of battle faded and the column regrouped, the bond between them deepened further with shared glances and quiet words of admiration that spoke of a romance still unfolding petal by petal. He dismounted and approached her, his hand finding hers in full view of the soldiers, a public vow that sent warmth cascading through her. "I stand with you always," he vowed, his voice rich with emotion, "no matter what shadows the court may cast. Your stars and your heart have become my truest compass." Yet even as the words wrapped around her like starlight, a scout returned from the far ridge, his face pale with fresh warning. "The enemy forces are regrouping, my king, larger than before, and they carry sealed orders from the dissident nobles in the capital. They know of her influence, and they come not just for the supply line, but for the Omega who dares to wield such power." Her pulse quickened with a surge of resolve and lingering fear, the mini cliffhanger hanging heavy in the air as unseen dangers loomed on the horizon, threatening to test the bond, the romance, and the emerging voice Astrid had only just begun to raise against the gathering storm. The ancient hall of the Star Sanctum rose beneath an open dome of night sky where countless constellations wheeled overhead like guardians watching over Draven Dom's most sacred ground. Torches of pure silver flame lined the circular walls, casting ethereal light across marble floors, etched with ancient map lines that seemed to pulse with forgotten power, while the air hummed with a low resonant energy that vibrated through her very bones. Astrid stood at the center of the ritual circle, her small frame clad in simple white robes that shimmered like moonlight on water, her heart pounding with a mixture of awe and lingering fear as the high priestess began the sacred chant that would merge her star-mapping gift with Draven Dom's ancient protective energies. The Alpha King stood just beyond the circle's edge, his powerful presence a steady anchor, his eyes never leaving her face, filled with quiet support and the deep regret that had now transformed into unwavering belief. Cinematic swirls of soft golden light began to rise from the floor, gathering around her like living constellations as the priestess placed an ancient map of the entire realm at her feet, its parchment glowing as if awakened by her nearness. Astrid closed her eyes, feeling the bond between her and Draven flare brighter than ever, a warm starlit thread connecting their souls, while the ritual's power surged through her veins like rivers of pure starfire. "This is the moment I have feared and longed for," Astrid thought, her inner voice trembling, yet growing steadier with every breath. For years I hid my gift in shadows, terrified it would mark me as weak or dangerous, but now these energies call to me, asking me to become more, to let the stars fully awaken and prove that the powerless can hold the fate of a kingdom in their hands. Tears slipped down her cheeks, hot and freeing as the light intensified, swirling around her in delicate spirals that lifted strands of her hair and made the faint star marks on her skin glow with inner radiance. The priestess's voice rose in melodic harmony, guiding the merge, and suddenly the map at her feet blazed to life, every river, ridge, and valley igniting with her familiar star symbols, now magnified a thousandfold, revealing hidden threats and pathways across the entire realm in breathtaking detail. Astrid gasped as Draven Dom's protective energies flooded her senses, showing her not just battle lines but the living heartbeat of the land, the quiet pains of oppressed omegas, the silent strength waiting to be unleashed. Astrid D. I am changing. Astrid realized, her thoughts blooming with empowering wonder. No longer the invisible girl who copied maps in fear, I am the voice of the stars, the bridge between the powerless and the throne. Strength flowed through her like dawn after endless night, washing away the trauma of childhood exile. The humiliation in the war room, the years of silenced whispers, until only resolve remained shining and unbreakable. Draven watched with quiet intensity, his broad shoulders squared, yet his expression soft with emotion. As he witnessed her transformation, the bond between them thrumming like a celestial symphony that made his own heart ache with redemption and love earned through every hard-won moment. You are radiant, he whispered across the circle, his voice carrying on the ritual winds a private encouragement meant only for her ears. Your light is changing everything, and I stand here humbled, honored to witness the queen you were always meant to become. The words wrapped around her like a warm cloak, deepening her courage as the swirling lights coalesced into a brilliant vortex above her head, the ritual reaching its critical peak where the full power of her gift would either fully awaken or overwhelm her completely. Astrid lifted her arms instinctively, the stars on the map flaring brighter until the entire hall glowed with celestial fire, revealing visions of future battles, won through wisdom, not force, of councils where omegas finally spoke with equal voice. Yet at the height of the merge, a sudden shadow flickered at the edge of the dome, an unseen presence pressing against the protective barrier, as if the political factions had found a way to disrupt the ritual from afar, their dark intent coiling like storm clouds ready to strike. Her breath caught the light, faltering for a heartbeat as doubt tried to creep back in, but Astrid D it away with fierce determination, focusing on Draven's steady gaze and the inner strength that now burned brighter than any star. The energies surged again, uncertain and powerful, pulling her toward a transformation that would either crown her as Draven Dom's true guardian or test her newfound voice in ways Astrid had never imagined, leaving the ritual's climax hanging on a razor's edge as distant thunder rolled across the starlit sky, signaling dangers that could shatter everything they had built if the merge did not hold. The swirling lights reached their crescendo in the ancient hall as the vortex of starfire above her head descended like a gentle waterfall of pure celestial energy, enveloping her completely. The map at her feet ignited with brilliant light, every star mark Astrid had ever placed now blazing with true undeniable power, spreading across the parchment like living constellations that illuminated not only Draven Dom, but the very soul of the land itself. Astrid gasped as the gift fully awakened within her, the land's voice flooding her senses, clear and resonant for the first time, like a chorus of ancient whispers revealing every hidden path, every unspoken pain, and every quiet hope that had been buried under layers of alpha dominance. Cinematic waves of golden radiance pulsed through the hall, reflecting off the marble floors and making the night sky above the dome shimmer, as if the stars themselves had descended to witness her transformation. In that moment, her inner thoughts soared with empowering joy. The end of invisibility has come at last. Astrid realized, her heart, swelling with the weight of years, finally lifted. No longer the silent shadow in the war room, no longer the forgotten Omega whose stars were erased. Without a second glance, I stand here fully seen, fully empowered, my gift no longer a secret burden, but a beacon that will light the way for every powerless voice in the realm. Tears of pure triumph streamed down her cheeks as the energies settled within her, leaving her glowing with an inner starlight that made her feel unbreakable, radiant, and truly alive. The Alpha King stepped forward as the ritual circle faded, his powerful arms opening in a gesture of profound respect and the deepening bond that now burned steady and true between them. "You have embraced your power completely," he said, his voice rich with emotion, carrying the slow burn warmth of a connection earned through hardship and honesty. "I watched you rise from the shadows I once cast you into, and now I see the queen, the guardian, the voice Draven Dom has always needed. Your stars do not merely guide armies, they awaken the land itself, and I am humbled beyond measure to stand beside you, not as ruler, but as partner in this new dawn." Astrid turned to him, her eyes meeting his with a depth that spoke volumes of mutual respect and the quiet romance still unfolding like petals in the moonlight. "Your belief in me, my king, has been the catalyst that allowed this awakening," Astrid replied, her words soft, yet filled with sincere emotion. "For so long I believed my gift was a curse, a mark of weakness that would keep me forever invisible. But your regret, your support, and this bond have shown me the truth. Together we prove that power is not only in strength, but in the wisdom of the powerless, and I am grateful beyond words to share this journey with you." Their dialogue flowed emotional and tender, the bond deepening further as he took her hands in his, the touch sending waves of starlit warmth through her entire being. "We will face whatever comes next side by side," he vowed, his tone laced with quiet love and unwavering commitment. "Your voice will reshape the laws, your stars will protect the innocent, and I will stand as your shield and your equal." Her inner thoughts celebrated the moment fully. "This is redemption, not just for him, but for me, the invisible girl, now empowered, the voiceless, now heard. The slow burn romance between us feels like the most beautiful star map ever drawn, earned through patience and truth, and I embrace it with all my heart, knowing it will help me change the world." Yet as the last echoes of the ritual faded, and the hall grew still, a messenger burst through the grand doors, his face Astrid in with urgency. "My king, the political enemies have launched their final move. They have rallied the traditional factions in the capital, and are marching toward the sanctum with decrees to declare the ritual invalid, and the Omega's power as treason." The threat loomed heavy in the air, the mini cliffhanger hanging like a dark cloud over their moment of triumph as Draven Dom's future hung in the balance once more. The grand throne hall of the capital citadel gleamed under massive crystal chandeliers that cast rivers of golden light across marble floors veined with silver and walls hung with ancient battle banners now trembling slightly in the charged air. Nobles and generals filled the tiered seats, their faces a sea of hardened expressions and skeptical stares, while whispers rippled like wind before a storm as Astrid stood at the center of the raised dais beside the Alpha King, her small frame no longer hidden, but illuminated by the same starlit glow that still lingered from the ritual. Tension thickened the atmosphere like invisible smoke, accusations already flying from the front rows, where the most traditional alphas leaned forward with clenched fists. "This Omega's so-called gift is nothing but a dangerous illusion," one grizzled lord bellowed, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "Astrid has bewitched Draven with her marks, and now dares to speak of rights for the weak, threatening the very foundations of our strength." Another general rose, pointing an accusing finger. "Her stars mock every battle we have won through true alpha power. Declare her influence invalid before Astrid turns our kingdom into a realm ruled by shadows and superstition." The words struck like arrows, yet Astrid felt the bond's warm, steady pulse beside her Draveness. Presence a silent shield that fueled her rising courage. For years I stood silent in corners, watching these same voices erase my marks, Astrid thought her inner voice transforming from trembling doubt to unshakable resolve. But today the powerless steps forward, and the stars within me will not be silenced again. This is my moment to speak for every Omega who was ever cast aside, to prove that true power blooms from quiet wisdom, not roaring force. Astrid drew a deep breath, stepping slightly ahead of Draven, her hands steady at her sides, as the hall fell into a heavy, expectant hush. The cinematic weight of every eye upon her felt like a spotlight of destiny, turning the vast chamber into a stage where her journey from invisible to powerful would finally be witnessed by all. "I stand before you not as a threat, but as a voice long denied," Astrid began, her tone soft at first, then ringing clear and empowering like a star breaking through endless night. "My stars have guided your armies through dangers you never saw, saving lives while prejudice nearly cost us everything. They do not weaken Alpha strength, they complete it, revealing paths of safety and foresight that the land itself offers to those willing to listen. Accusations of bewitching or treason are born from fear of change, fear of sharing power with those you once called powerless. Yet I ask you, look at the victories we have claimed, not through force alone, but through the quiet corrections that kept soldiers alive in Draven Dom whole." Her words flowed with emotional depth, carrying the weight of her trauma, the childhood exile, the war room humiliation, and the slow burn awakening that had brought her here. Every Omega silenced, every gift buried under tradition deserves to be heard, because the powerless hold wisdom that can reshape the world for the better. Draven stood tall beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, in open support, his gaze sweeping the crowd with quiet authority. "Astrid speaks truth," he declared, his voice steady and resonant. "Her gift has proven itself on the battlefield and in the sanctum. I will not let outdated fears blind us to the future Astrid offers." The loudest challenger, a towering noble with a face twisted in rage, stepped forward from the front row, his fists balled at his sides. "Then prove it, Omega," he snarled. "If your stars are so powerful, show us now, or admit you are nothing but a fraud who has seduced the throne with false light." The hall erupted in murmurs, some voices rising in agreement, others shifting uneasily as cinematic tension built like gathering thunderheads. Her heart raced, but the bond steadied her, the warmth spreading through her veins like liquid starfire, reminding her of the ritual's awakening and the inner strength Astrid had claimed. Astrid lifted her chin, meeting the challenger's glare without flinching. "My stars do not perform for spectacle," Astrid replied, her voice now ringing with clear, unshakable power. "They speak through action, through the lives saved and the paths illuminated. But if you demand proof, then know this: every mark I have ever placed has protected this kingdom, while your prejudice would have led us to ruin. I stand here not to conquer, but to heal, to give voice to the voiceless, and to change laws that have kept too many in shadows for too long." The words landed like a quiet thunderclap, the crowd falling into stunned silence as her empowering truth hung in the air, undeniable and transformative. Faces that had been twisted with anger now softened with uncertainty, some nobles exchanging glances of reluctant respect, while Draven's pride shone openly beside her. In that moment Astrid felt truly powerful, her inner thoughts celebrating the journey. "From the cartographer's corner to the throne hall, my voice has risen, and it will never be silenced again. The powerless have become the light that guides us all." Yet even as the hall remained wrapped in that heavy, stunned quiet, a distant horn sounded from the outer gates, followed by the hurried clatter of armored boots as a messenger burst through the grand doors, his face pale and his hands clutching a sealed scroll marked with the insignia of the dissident factions. "The final challenge has arrived, my king," he announced, breathless. "The traditional lords have rallied. An emergency assembly outside the hall demanding the Omega's immediate exile, or they will march on the citadel itself." The threat loomed like a dark cloud over the stunned silence, turning her moment of triumph into a new precipice where Dravendom's future hung in the balance once more. The grand coronation hall shimmered beneath a canopy of living starlight woven by the newly awakened energies of the sanctum, its crystal arches glowing with soft celestial fire that bathed the assembled court in hues of silver and gold. Banners of renewal fluttered gently from the high beams as the entire kingdom seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with the scent of blooming night jasmine and poly Astrid marble, while every noble general and servant stood in who Astrid awe. Astrid knelt beside the Alpha King on the raised dais, her small hands steady despite the whirlwind. Inside her chest, as the ancient crown of intertwined silver stars and golden leaves was placed upon her head by the high priestess. In that instant the bond between them flared like a supernova, warm and unbreakable, flooding her veins with a power that felt both ancient and intimately hers. Cinematic waves of light cascaded from the dome above, swirling around them both in delicate spirals that lifted the edges of her ceremonial robes and made the faint star marks on her skin glow with inner radiance. From the cartographer's forgotten corner, where I copied maps in silence, to this dais where Draven Dom now bows, Astrid thought, her inner voice soaring with empowering triumph. I was invisible, a voiceless Omega whose stars were erased without thought, yet today I rise not through conquest, but through the quiet wisdom that saved lives and healed divides. Tears of pure joy slipped down her cheeks as the crown settled its weight, a gentle reminder of the journey from trauma to transformation, from fear to fearless voice. Draven turned to her, his powerful frame radiant in his own renewed regalia, his eyes shining with pride and a love earned through every slow-burn moment of regret and redemption. "My queen," he said, his voice rich with emotion that carried across the hall, "you have walked through shadows no one else could see and emerged as the light that guides us all. Your stars awakened the realm, and now your voice will reshape it. I stand beside you not as ruler, but as partner, humbled and honored to witness the powerful woman you have become." Astrid rose slowly, her heart swelling as Astrid faced the court, the bond pulsing steadily between them like a shared heartbeat. With the crown upon her brow, Astrid felt the full weight of her gift, no longer hidden, but alive and ready to serve. "Today we begin anew," Astrid declared, her tone clear and empowering, ringing with the quiet strength that had once been silenced. "I propose the first decrees of our shared reign, laws that give every Omega a voice in the councils, protecting their gifts as sacred treasures rather than hidden burdens. No longer will the powerless be cast to the margins. Omegas will sit beside Alphas in every assembly, their intuitive wisdom valued equally their stars, and insights guiding decisions of war, peace, and justice." The hall stirred with a mix of gasps and murmurs, some faces lighting with hope, others tightening with old resistance, yet Draven nodded with open love and pride, his hand finding hers in full view of all. "Your vision is the future we need," he replied, his words sincere and supportive, weaving seamlessly with hers. "I endorse these laws with all my heart because they honor the very power that saved our armies and healed my blindness. Together we will ensure every gift, every voice finds its place, for Dravendom's true strength lies in unity, not division." Their dialogue flowed emotional and collaborative, like stars aligning in perfect harmony as advisors brought forward scrolls, and the council members leaned in with growing attentiveness. Astrid spoke of specific protections, detailed safeguards for young Omegas learning their abilities, and equal seats in the war room where her kind had once been ghosts. Draven listened with unwavering respect, adding his own insights on implementation, his pride evident in every glance, every affirming word that made her feel truly seen, and Sherry Astrid D. Her inner thoughts celebrated the moment fully. This is redemption complete, the invisible girl, now crowned the voiceless, now legislating change. The slow burn bond has blossomed into partnership, and with every decree I rewrite not only laws, but the destiny of every silenced soul who follows. The first vote came swiftly, the council raising hands in overwhelming support as the decrees passed. Into law shifting Draven Dom with a single powerful ripple that felt like dawn breaking after endless night. Cheers rose softly at first, then swelled into a wave of renewal as servants and lesser nobles applauded openly, the air electric with possibility. Yet even as the hall filled with the glow of new beginnings, a trusted advisor approached the dais. His face etched with quiet urgency, clutching a sealed missive from the outer provinces. "My queen," the advisor whispered, "the traditional strongholds resist the new laws some lords are gathering forces, claiming the changes undermine alpha rule, and they call for an emergency assembly that could fracture the realm if not addressed swiftly." The threat hovered like a distant shadow over the celebration, turning her moment of crowning triumph into a new challenge where the laws Astrid had just birthed would face their first true test beyond the safety of the hall. In the newly formed Equal Council chamber, sunlight streamed through tall arched windows overlooking the blooming palace gardens, painting the long oak table in warm golden hues, while representatives from every walk of life sat together for the first time, alphas, omegas, and betas side by side there, faces reflecting a mixture of cautious hope and lingering skepticism. Astrid presided at the head of the table, her silver star crown resting lightly upon her brow, the bond with the Alpha King thrumming steadily beside her as he sat to her right, his powerful presence now one of quiet partnership rather than dominance. The air carried the scent of fresh parchment and blooming jasmine from the open balconies, while maps of the realm lay unrolled before them, each one alive with her newly empowered star marks glowing faintly like living constellations, guiding not war but peace. This is the heart of change, Astrid thought, her inner voice swelling with empowering wonder, the moment where the powerless truly step into the light and prove that chosen family forged through wisdom and unity can heal what bloodlines and tradition once divided. For so long I copied maps in silence, my stars erased without question, yet today these same marks will end conflicts that blood alone could never resolve. Astrid leaned forward, her fingers tracing a delicate star over a disputed border region where long simmering rivalries had drained resources and lives for generations. "The land whispers a new path here," Astrid said, her voice clear and resonant, carrying the quiet strength that had once been hidden. "A shared sanctuary zone where both sides plant peace gardens instead of watchtowers, where omegas trained in my gift will mediate with intuitive foresight, showing safe routes for trade and understanding. No more endless patrols, only dialogue rooted in the Earth's own balance." The former opponents who had once thundered against her in the throne hall now listened there, expressions softening with reluctant respect as a grizzled alpha lord who had called her gift treason leaned in studying the glowing mark. "I fought against this change," he admitted, his voice gruff, yet sincere. "My pride blinded me to the lives my stubbornness cost. But seeing how your stars revealed the ambush that nearly destroyed our supply line, and now this peaceful alternative, I see redemption in unity, not division. Your wisdom has shown me that true strength includes the voices we once silenced." Emotional dialogue flowed around the table like a gentle river, each voice adding to the harmony as another noble Omega representative spoke with tears in her eyes. "For years my family hid our intuitive gifts, fearing exile, yet under your laws we now sit here as equals, guiding the realm. Draven Dom begins to flourish already with your peaceful strategies, ending border skirmy Astrid S that claimed my brother. You have given us more than laws, you have given us hope, a chosen family, where blood no longer determines worth. Astrid felt her heart expand with profound emotion, the bond with Draven deepening further as he nodded with open pride, his hand resting lightly on hers in full view of the council. "You lead with grace and vision, my queen," he said, his tone rich with love and respect earned through every slow burn moment of regret and growth. "These strategies will heal what war could not, and I stand beside you proud to watch the realm transform under your stars." Her inner thoughts celebrated the unfolding legacy, like stars aligning in perfect harmony. This is the power of the powerless blooming fully, the invisible cartographer, now uniting former enemies through wisdom that values every heart. Chosen family over bloodlines, the theme that has carried me from shadows to this table where redemption flows freely and Dravendom breathes easier with each peaceful decree. Laughter and nods rippled through the chamber as they voted on the new strategies, the maps glowing brighter as if the land itself approved, sealing the end of long conflicts with unanimous agreement. Reports began to arrive from the outer provinces, the first caravans crossing the new sanctuary zones. Without incident, trade flourishing, and young Omegas arriving at the palace to learn their gifts in open academies where their stars would be celebrated, not hidden. The realm stirred with renewal, villages once divided now sharing harvest festivals, soldiers laying down arms to help build healing centers, and the air itself seeming lighter as hope spread like dawn across the horizon. Astrid watched it all unfold, her spirit soaring with the knowledge that her journey had not only changed laws but had rewritten the very soul of Dravendom, proving that quiet voices could reshape destinies more powerfully than any sword. Yet as the council session drew to a triumphant close and the members rose with renewed purpose, a final messenger approached the table, his face bright with news from the farthest provinces. "The last resistant strongholds have sent word, my queen," he announced. "They lay down their banners and request to join the equal council drawn by the peaceful prosperity your stars have brought. Dravendom Floyuri Astrid S, as one the bright horizon stretching endlessly before them, filled with academies, sanctuaries, and a future where every child, regardless of designation, would trace their first star with pride, knowing the powerless had become the architects of lasting peace. The years had unfolded like constellations, slowly revealing their full brilliance across Dravendom, now transformed under the gentle, enduring guidance of her awakened gift. Astrid walked through the sunlit halls of the newly built Academy of Stars, her silver crown resting lightly upon her brow as young Omegas gathered in open courtyards, their laughter ringing like silver bells while they learned to trust the intuitive whispers that had once been silenced by fear and tradition. The air carried the sweet scent of blooming jasmine and fresh ink as children bent over large maps, tracing delicate symbols with small hands, their eyes wide with wonder at the power they were encouraged to embrace without shame or hiding. Cinematic rays of golden sunlight streamed through tall arched windows, painting the marble floors in patterns that mirrored the constellations overhead, and Astrid paused to watch a group of eager students sharing stories of their first star visions, each voice rising clear and proud in the spacious room designed as both classroom and sanctuary. Her inner thoughts flowed with a profound, empowering joy that filled every corner of her being. From the invisible cartographer who once hid her marks in shadowed corners, terrified of rejection, to this queen who built sanctuaries where every gift could shine freely, I have walked the complete journey from oppressed and silent to powerful and heard. The laws I champion now protect these young souls, ensuring no child will ever feel the trauma of exile or erasure that once defined my path. Chosen family over bloodlines, the core truth that has healed our realm, proving that unity born from quiet wisdom outshines any single line of strength and creates a brighter world for all. The Alpha King joined her then, his powerful frame moving with the same quiet grace that had grown Between them, over the years, their bond a steady, warm starlight that connected their hearts without. Words yet spoke volumes of love earned through every slow-burn moment of regret and redemption. He slipped his hand into hers, his touch as tender as the first garden walk that had sparked their connection, and he smiled down at her with eyes full of deep pride. "My love, look at what your voice has created," he said, his tone rich with emotion that carried the weight of their shared journey. "The Academy thrives with young minds discovering their gifts. The sanctuary walls stand strong as safe havens for those once cast aside, and our equal council meets even now in the grand chamber below, discussing the future with voices from every designation united as one. I am in awe of the woman who rose from shadows to light the way for us all, and I am grateful beyond measure to stand beside you as partner and husband." Astrid turned to him, her eyes shining with tears of fulfillment, the bond flaring brighter in that moment of shared legacy, wrapping them in warmth like a constellation finally complete. "And you, my king, have walked every step beside me," Astrid replied, her words soft yet filled with sincere love and gratitude that echoed the empowering arc of her life. "Your regret became redemption, your support became the foundation that allowed my stars to fully awaken. Together we have shown Draven Dom that power is not taken, but shared, that the voiceless can rewrite laws and destinies. I feel the land itself breathing easier under these changes. The wars ended, the borders opened, the hearts healed, and a future of true equality taking root in every village and hall." They continued their walk hand in hand until they reached a sunlit balcony overlooking the central courtyard where their young heir, a bright-eyed child with her mother's gentle features and Draven's strong spirit, sat at a low table carefully tracing his first star upon a simple map of the realm. The boy looked up, his face lighting with pure joy as he called out, "Mother, Father, see the star. The land showed me it marks a new path for the traders from the southern provinces, a safe route where all can meet in peace." Astrid knelt beside him, pulling him into a warm embrace, her heart overflowing with emotion as Draven watched with loving pride, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, completing the perfect circle of family and legacy. "This is our legacy," Astrid thought, her inner voice a celebration of triumph and hope that resonated through every fiber of her being. "Our child will grow knowing his gifts are celebrated, not hidden. The equal council debates in harmony below, and Draven Dom thrives with academies, sanctuaries, and laws that value every voice. From oppressed and silent to powerful and heard, I have changed the world not with force but with the quiet wisdom of stars that now guide us all into a bright future filled with chosen family unity and endless possibility, where no one will ever be invisible again." As they stood together watching the child, the equal council's distant voices carried on the breeze. Harmonious and purposeful, the realm flourishing under the laws born from her once silent voice. The future stretched endless and bright, like the constellations overhead, promising generations where every child, regardless of designation, would trace their first star with pride, knowing the powerless had become the architects of lasting peace. Her story has come to an end, but our journey together continues. If you found this story inspiring and meaningful, please like the video to support me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next empowering stories. And if you have any thoughts about the characters, her journey, or want to share your own story, please comment below. I really look forward to reading and chatting with you.